activity as a service, not as a process, an activity as a service, and you define the value it can give to each others, and they are repeatable, and you can do in continuous improvement and involvement with it, you start to create values in all kinds of different levels with the same knowledge and input you have from the company. So we leave that behind. This was just to give a little view on the business model. 90% want to innovate the way they do business. 13% feel that they can do this with only process change. They miss the link between business model, like they said here, BPM, organization, and technology. Many of you, obviously, this is an SAP user group, already know this level, or what this really hurts. This is how they felt they should do it. Defining the strategic business objectives to the process performance indicators. This is, by the way, the fewest people do. This is by what the whole book, the second book that Anna's writing, and I'm giving input to the part. Today, KPIs and process performance indicators are done. And as a part of the very startup, you link it to strategy, but you only link the process to the strategy. You do a process map of how strategy is done. That is not a full interlink into the business model. Between there's the organization and the technology. If we look this in a little more technical way, this is the modeling platform you use. This is, every one of you probably knows, when you're working with BPM, you have a business process platform you are working on. There you innovate some, others you optimize, until you do the business process transformation. The same way you actually must do it up here. And who wants the short story can actually talk with Torben, because that's actually his version of how these two need to interlink. He needed to develop this part, and between here is the enterprise architecture and the SOA. Whoever starts these initiatives, and this is documented even by Gartner Group, this part, but these parts today not. This is just as much an initiative which needs to be part. If we look at it in a little bit more technical way, you would have on top, by the way, this is a typical business model. This is where you define core, non-core. This would be core, this is non-core. This would then be cost, high cost, value. You define it on very high level. You address and define business model, explore core components, identify value areas. Second layer is the business layer. Here you have the business process workflows, the transactions, any of the collaboration of the processes. Here you have the application architecture, the information architecture, including the data, business objects, exchange formats, security, privates, etc. And at the lowest level, we have talking about the infrastructure architecture, hardware, servers, networks. This is what we are talking about in alignment. Most do this layer. Those who do this mostly do not have a form. ALA, anybody from ALA here? ALA? You used IBM for this. Part of the CBM, component business model of mapping it. I happen to know because I developed this for IBM. Component business model is a part of business modeling. Very good, very innovative. And this is where you start to have the interlink. 98% want a method to identify and define business value. 11% feel that they are actively planning, creating, and realizing business value. Very interesting part. What we found out is that there is, if you look at a typical project flow, in a project, you have plan, build, and run. If you were looking at it from the perspective here of resources, you typically, in terms of the project, you typically have not so much resources in the start. You have much more in the build phase, where you implement it. And when you run it, too sadly, it's sometimes more than you want. You want it down, too sadly it's higher, but it's somewhere between here. Obviously then optimization is done to move this down with the cost. What the companies, if we are looking at value, how much value do you create in the build phase? In itself, you don't get any value, right? Because obviously value you get here. Can we agree? All right. This is low. There's somewhere some value, but it's somewhere it's low, okay? What about the planning stage? Now this is very interesting. Those who did this only received this. There was a direct proportion between value planning and value realization. What I cannot plan for, I cannot create. Obviously, what I cannot see, I cannot do. What I can't do, I can't get. So there is direct link between value planning, value creation, and value realization. Those who plan for less, what you cannot plan for, you most likely it's a more random thing that it will happen. Especially me as an engineer, I always have difficulty in seeing how it should get there. But obviously most projects get value. Back then when I implemented ERP, SAP at Bang & Olufsen, this was when I was with Max, we didn't even do a business case. But at that time, we didn't do any business cases in the start of the 90s. It was not asked. Neither did we do it for Nokia, Ericsson, or the many, many others we implemented. At that time, there was not the same view of the world. Today there is a focus on this, and there is a focus on ROI and TCO, the cost of it. My people here. And this had a direct interlink of how this is done. So, sorry, I forgot my stick. Very important. The good thing is I had some laser pointers, and somehow if you put that at the university, they get feet. It's like your USB stick. They will disappear. But nobody wants this. So this I have had for many years. So let's go into some of the value creation and value realization. If we are looking at here the value planning, the seeing, the value creation, the doing, there was a direct link to the value realization, the getting part. Interesting between this was the companies trying to do this with standards. You cannot compete with best practice. Sorry, but that is bullshit. It's impossible for anybody who wants to take up this discussion with me later on. I'm happy to say it. And contrary to what SAP has preached over 15 years,